It began with a whisper. A routine medical checkup for Princess Charlotte, harmless, necessary, and completely unremarkable, until one line in her DNA report set off silent alarms behind palace walls. What did the doctors find? Why was Prince William's face pale when he was called in? And who immediately ordered the file sealed? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, nothing about the appointment seemed unusual. A simple follow-up after a minor health concern, a precaution every responsible parent would take. Charlotte arrived laughing, unaware that this ordinary visit would quietly rewrite the future of the monarchy. Blood drawn, samples labeled. The kind of routine procedure performed thousands of times a day across the country. And yet, within minutes of the first results appearing on a private screen, the tone inside the laboratory shifted. The lead geneticist paused, then stared again, and again. What appeared on the report did not match any known pattern in royal medical records. Not illness, not danger, but something profoundly unexpected. A genetic signature that should not have been there at all. A marker so rare that the system flagged it twice, as if doubting its own data. The call to Kensington Palace was made quietly, from a secured line reserved only for emergencies. No assistants, no intermediaries, direct to William's private secretary. The message was brief, deliberately restrained, but weighted with unmistakable urgency. There was no panic in the voice. That would have drawn attention. Instead, there was precision, control, and a single phrase that would echo through the palace for days to come. Non-urgent, but significant irregularity detected. Number 10. William was summoned without explanation. No briefing, no warning, just an instruction to come immediately and alone. When the file was placed in his hands, he read in silence. Once, then again. The color drained from his face, not in fear, but in disbelief. This was not a crisis of health. This was something far more destabilizing. Something that touched blood, destiny, and legacy itself. Questions flooded his mind faster than he could contain them. How could this exist in Charlotte's genome? Why had no trace of it ever appeared in royal history? And most unsettling of all, how long had someone known this was possible? Within the hour, a confidential meeting was arranged. Advisors selected not for rank, but for loyalty. Medical experts flown in without records. Phones surrendered. Notes forbidden. The room sealed, as if the walls themselves could not be trusted. Every word spoken inside was measured, cautious, burdened with implication. Because what they were discussing was not simply a child's DNA, it was the future of the crown. No announcement was prepared. No family informed. Catherine was told only that additional tests were required. Staff were dismissed early. Security quietly doubled around Charlotte's wing. The palace did not erupt into chaos. It did something far more dangerous. It went silent, and in that silence, something ancient stirred. Because this discovery was not just unexpected, it was unprecedented. And if the world ever learned what had appeared inside the blood of a 10-year-old princess, nothing about the monarchy would ever be the same again. But what exactly did the test reveal? And why would it be powerful enough to threaten centuries of royal legacy? Behind closed doors, elite geneticists and confidential royal scientists pore over Charlotte's genome. It's not illness. It's not paternity. It's something deeper, something never before encountered in any royal descendant. And now, they must decide. Conceal it forever, or risk the world finding out. The mood in the underground meeting room was somber but electric. Files were handed over like classified intelligence. Specialists in molecular biology, neurology, and hereditary medicine gathered in the utmost secrecy. What they were staring at was no ordinary mutation. It was a phenomenon. A rare strand buried deep within Charlotte's genetic map, one that shimmered with potential and danger alike. The phrase repeated most that day was one no monarch ever expects to hear from a physician. Unprecedented anomaly. They called it hyper-adaptive cellular regeneration. On paper, it sounded like science fiction. A dormant gene, quiet, inactive, but clearly structured to trigger extraordinary responses. Under the right conditions, it could accelerate cell repair. Bones could knit faster. Tissue could regenerate without scarring. But that was just the surface. More alarming was the neurosignature, a pattern suggesting a heightened form of connectivity between neurons, potentially enhancing memory storage, learning capacity, and perhaps consciousness itself. This was not supposed to exist in a royal bloodline. Initial comparisons yielded nothing within the European genetic archives. Some markers were reminiscent of certain isolated genetic traits found in untouched tribal populations in the Amazon or deep Arctic Siberia, genes that evolution had quietly preserved in silence, away from the industrialized world. Yet, here it was, wrapped inside the bloodline of the House of Windsor. The implications were staggering and terrifying. Within hours, the room split into two warring schools of thought. On one side were the visionaries, the ones who believed this was a divine accident or hidden legacy, something that could redefine medicine. One scientist argued that if they studied the mutation further, it could lead to revolutionary treatments for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even memory loss or trauma-related disorders. Another spoke in awe about the possible halt of aging through cellular rejuvenation. But not everyone was marveling. The others, more cautious and deeply embedded in royal protocol, warned of catastrophic repercussions. If this gene wasn't inherited from either parent and confirmed as such, then someone, somewhere, would ask where it came from. And once that question was asked, everything would unravel. Succession, bloodline legitimacy, trust, legacy. Centuries of carefully maintained heritage could collapse under the weight of a single mutation. What if this wasn't a gift, they asked, but a sign of contamination? A breach in the royal genetic fabric? If the truth were to leak, the tabloids wouldn't call it a miracle. They'd call it treason. And yet, burying it felt just as dangerous. Could they live with themselves knowing they had hidden a discovery that might heal millions? The moral weight of concealment was unbearable, but the risk of exposure was unthinkable. Silence, for the moment, prevailed, and as the palace drafted protocols, encrypted files, and crafted contingency statements, a new unease spread through the room. Because one thought haunted them more than the rest. What if this mutation wasn't random? What if it was planted, inherited, or worse, chosen? But in a family where lineage is everything, the next question becomes terrifying. Where did the gene come from? When a child carries something no parent does, the shadows begin to whisper. And now, those whispers are growing louder in the corridors of the monarchy. Could Charlotte's rare mutation suggest more than just a medical anomaly? Could it suggest something about her bloodline? The palace could no longer cling to coincidence. With the discovery of a mutation so rare it defied existing medical records, the next logical step was a full parental analysis. Quietly, and without informing the wider family, both William and Catherine submitted their DNA samples for comparison. It was framed as a standard precaution. But the atmosphere was anything but routine. The results didn't just raise eyebrows, they detonated the very foundation of what the crown believed to be true. Neither parent carried the mutation. Not in dominant form, not in recessive form. The gene wasn't dormant in either lineage. It didn't exist. Charlotte's genetic signature was, by all known science, impossible unless it came from somewhere else. Somewhere outside the two people who had brought her into the world. The moment the data was confirmed, the room fell into absolute silence. That silence quickly gave way to fear. Advisors urged immediate lockdown of the information. The media could never learn of this. If even a whisper made it to the press, it would spark questions no one was prepared to answer. But inside the palace, the theories began to spiral. And they weren't just scientific, they were political. Could this have been a medical mishap? Was there interference during Catherine's pregnancy? Or, even darker was it possible, Charlotte was not conceived in the way the public had always been led to believe. Talk of embryo tampering emerged. Quiet references were made to fertility specialists who had once operated under complete discretion. Files were pulled from storage, documents re-examined. One theory gained dangerous traction. that a third-party donor may have been involved without full transparency. The idea, once considered unthinkable, now couldn't be dismissed. If an anonymous donor was used deliberately or accidentally, it would explain the anomaly. But it would also annihilate the public illusion of bloodline purity. William withdrew further. His usual composure gave way to tension, and his inner circle began to fragment. Longtime aides resigned without explanation. Friends were turned away. For the first time, there were reports of heated arguments between William and senior royals behind palace doors. He was no longer just trying to protect Charlotte. He was trying to protect the very idea of who he was, who she was, and what their place in history meant. The betrayal didn't feel distant. It felt intimate, close, like someone within the palace had known all along. And that betrayal, if proven, wouldn't just scandalize the institution. It would destroy the last thread of stability holding it together. Historical analysts inside the palace unearthed chilling parallels to lost heirs stories once buried in royal history about children born of secrets and lies. Was Charlotte becoming another chapter in that buried legacy? And then came the quietest betrayal of all. William began to suspect those closest to him. He questioned Catherine's silence, her calm, her unwavering composure. He began to suspect even those who had served them loyally since day one. The paranoia wasn't baseless, it was survival. But before the storm could devour them all, an unexpected visitor stepped forward, holding a truth even more dangerous than the palace imagined. She was there from the beginning. An embryologist with ties to the Crown's most secure medical division. And now, nearly a decade later, she's risking everything to reveal the secret she swore she'd bury. Why now? And what is she protecting Charlotte from? Her name was Dr. Helena Vaughn. Once a trusted specialist deep within the palace's private medical wing, her departure from royal service was quiet. No headlines, no questions. But those within the inner circle remembered her. Brilliant, cautious, utterly devoted to discretion. So, when she re-emerged from the shadows, demanding to speak to Charlotte's private physician, the urgency was impossible to ignore. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to release. Helena confessed she had handled material related to royal embryos nearly 11 years ago. She named specific dates, logged procedures. She spoke of ultra-secure labs beneath classified hospitals and whispered of a research directive buried under multiple levels of clearance, Project Aragon. A program shrouded in layers of secrecy and silence. And though she claimed she had signed documents barring her from ever speaking about it, she said one thing had changed everything: Charlotte's DNA results. According to Dr. Vaughn, Project Aragon had been created under the guise of advancing reproductive safety for high-risk heirs. But its true purpose ran deeper. It was a bold and controversial experiment in gene therapy. She alleged that the goal was to secure a more resilient royal bloodline in preparation for a future the monarchy feared, one filled with instability, revolt, and existential threats. What stunned those listening wasn't just the science, it was who Helena claimed gave the final approval: Queen Elizabeth II. In her final days, the Queen had reportedly become obsessed with the long-term viability of the crown. Not in ceremonial terms, but in evolutionary ones. Helena said the Queen believed the world was changing too fast. That tradition alone couldn't hold the institution together. Something more was needed. Something built into the blood. Charlotte, Helena claimed, was the first subject of this vision. A child born not just of legacy, but of intervention. The twist? William and Catherine, she swore, were never told. The decision had been made under the cloak of necessity. Their child, their daughter, was the test case for a new age, one no one was supposed to ever uncover. Helena had tried to stay silent, but when the leaked genetic scan surfaced and whispers of Charlotte's anomaly reached the outside world, she knew the truth would come for them all. Her only choice was to speak first. But almost instantly, threats began to circle. Anonymous calls, security breaches, surveillance near her home. It was clear someone didn't want her talking, and they were prepared to do anything to stop her. And just as the palace tries to shut her down, Charlotte herself begins to exhibit strange and undeniable signs of transformation. It started with visions, moments of eerie clarity, a memory of a place she'd never been, a language she'd never studied suddenly spoken with ease. Charlotte was changing, and the palace could no longer contain it. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Children dream. They imagine. They mimic what they hear. But this wasn't mimicry. This wasn't imagination. Charlotte began describing images in detail. No child should know battlefields soaked in history. Ancient ceremonies long erased from public record. Names of kings and queens never taught in schoolbooks. At night, she whispered fragments of old languages, Latin, Greek, Old English, fluidly, confidently, without ever having studied a single one. Palace aides grew unsettled. Her governess reported hearing her speak with a cadence and depth far beyond her years. On one occasion, Charlotte corrected a royal historian who had mistakenly quoted a speech from King George VI. She not only knew the correct version, she recited it word for word, adding a passage from a private letter historians had long considered lost. The letter, days later, was discovered exactly where she said it would be. Then came the physical changes. They were subtle at first, an agility in movement, an uncanny sense of balance. A minor cut she received during horse training was healed within a day, leaving no scar. When she fell during a royal function rehearsal, palace staff braced for panic, but she stood up calm, unshaken, as if the pain never touched her. Doctors were called in. Scans were taken. Nothing alarming was found. But nothing could explain what was happening either. Inside palace corridors, speculation turned to superstition. Some said she had been chosen. Others feared she had been cursed. The word miracle was whispered by some, while others chose experiment. Whatever she was becoming, it no longer felt human in the conventional sense. Her presence carried a strange weight, gentle but impossible to ignore. One of the most unsettling changes came with her connection to Queen Elizabeth's private journals. Hidden in a secured wing of the palace, these diaries had been untouched since the monarch's passing. Yet Charlotte begged to see them, insisting she already knew what they said. When permission was reluctantly granted under tight supervision, she flipped to a page in a sealed volume and read aloud with trembling precision. The entry dated back decades. The topic? A dream Elizabeth had recorded about a future queen with ancient memory and untouchable light. Charlotte, at just 10, looked up and said, "She was dreaming of me." Catherine, shaken to her core, became protective to the point of paranoia. She pulled Charlotte from all public appearances, blocked communications, and refused to allow any more scientific testing. She clung to her daughter like a lioness in a collapsing jungle. But William was caught in a storm of awe and dread. He watched his daughter slip beyond his understanding and wondered, was she his at all? Or was she becoming something created for a destiny he was never meant to control? Yet nothing could prepare them for the one document Charlotte would find, one that could rewrite the monarchy's very design. Buried in a sealed vault beneath Windsor, Queen Elizabeth's final letter was never meant for public eyes, but Charlotte found it. And with it, a chilling confession, a royal prophecy, and a directive that could divide the family forever. No one could explain how she knew the room existed. The chamber had been sealed for over a decade, its existence known only to a select group of palace archivists. Yet Charlotte, in a quiet voice one morning, described its contents with uncanny precision. The table, the wall sconce, the second drawer beneath the crest-engraved desk. She spoke of a box with a lion clasp, one no one had seen in years. The room was accessed under tight security, half expecting to find nothing. But everything she described was there, exactly as she said. Inside the lion-clasped box, under layers of aged velvet, was a letter, not addressed to any known successor, not Charles, not William, but marked with the chilling inscription, "To my future heir of flame." It was written in Queen Elizabeth's unmistakable hand, dated just weeks before her death. The contents of the letter were not merely personal, they were prophetic, a testament laced with fear, hope, and resignation. It began not with ceremony, but with a single line, "The old ways are dying faster than I feared." Elizabeth spoke of a world unrecognizable to her, a kingdom built on tradition, now surrounded by chaos. She wrote of whispers she had heard from her own advisors. Whispers of genetic science and monarchical evolution. She confessed to allowing the green light of Project Aragon, framing it not as an experiment, but a necessity. To remain as we were, she wrote, would be to vanish. But to adapt, to evolve, might be to endure. Her words trembled on the page not with weakness, but with the weight of a decision that would reshape her family forever. She admitted to watching William his resolve, his sense of duty, but questioned whether he could lead a monarchy into a world ruled by data, by algorithm, by unrelenting change. He was raised for stability. But the future, she wrote, would demand unpredictability. She never mentioned Charlotte by name, but she referenced the one who carries both flame and memory. And that line alone sent shivers through Catherine's spine. When Catherine read the letter, she broke. Tears streamed silently, as she held it like a confession from beyond the grave. Not because of betrayal, but because of what it meant for her daughter. That all along, Charlotte had not been born merely of love or destiny, but of design. William, however, reacted with fury. He stormed out of the chamber, refusing to utter a word. He had been raised on duty, honor, and bloodlines. Now, the very foundation of his legacy was being rewritten by a letter penned in secrecy. And that letter, that truth, changed everything. Because it meant that Charlotte wasn't the next in line by accident. She was chosen. Not by Parliament, not by public will, but by something older, deeper, a monarch's dying hope for a future only one child might survive. Now Charlotte wasn't just a princess, she was something the monarchy had never seen, and the world was about to take notice. It only took one photo, one leaked lab report, and the world erupted. News anchors, scientists, world leaders, all demanding answers. And in the center of it all, a 10-year-old girl whose DNA could change humanity forever. The leak was never supposed to happen. The report was buried under layers of encryption, sealed behind security clearances only a handful could access. But all it took was one intern young, ambitious, and curious enough to look too closely. What they found was a snippet of Charlotte's genome, flagged for further investigation. It wasn't labeled with her name, but the code attached to the file, an internal royal tag, was enough to trace it back. In a single click, the data was uploaded to a closed international science forum. Within minutes, it was public. The world didn't pause, it exploded. Hashtags lit up social media platforms like wildfire. Number royal DNA, number next evolution, number princess code. Within an hour, top geneticists were analyzing the leaked data live on global news broadcasts. Their conclusions were consistent and astonishing. This wasn't just a royal anomaly. This was something the world had never seen. A sequence so rare, so complex, that one leading neuroscientist called it a biological leap forward. Another compared it to a living Rosetta Stone of medical advancement. Outside the palace, chaos surged. News vans crowded the gates, cameras aimed at every window. Commentators speculated everything from divine intervention to synthetic royalty. Religious leaders weighed in. Some declared Charlotte a sign from God. Others called for exorcism. Conspiracy theorists fanned the flames, spinning tales of lab-grown monarchs and genetic tampering orchestrated by secret global elites. But perhaps the loudest reaction came from within the halls of power. Parliament descended into fury. Members of the opposition demanded a full inquiry. Some MPs suggested an abdication might be necessary if the monarchy had knowingly manipulated the royal bloodline. One chilling motion called for Charlotte to be removed from the line of succession altogether, labeling her existence constitutionally destabilizing. It was as though the institution had been set ablaze by truth, and no one knew how to contain the fire. Inside the palace, the family was in freefall. Catherine refused to leave her daughter's side. Charlotte remained eerily calm, as if she had sensed this was always coming. But William, he was paralyzed. As pressure mounted, he delivered a statement measured, vague, and cold. He neither confirmed nor denied the authenticity of the leaked file. He urged the public to respect Charlotte's privacy, calling her a child first, royal second. But the absence of denial said more than any confirmation could, and still, the questions thundered louder. What was she? What did this mean for the monarchy? For medicine? For the future of human evolution? The palace gates, once symbols of strength, now looked like barricades barely holding back the flood. Rumors swirled of resignations, of emergency succession plans, of internal divisions deeper than ever before. And at the heart of it all was a girl who hadn't asked for any of this, but now carried the weight of a planet's obsession. But the palace couldn't stop the flood. And what came next would test William's love for his daughter against his loyalty to the crown. The crown or his daughter. That was the choice. And for a man raised to serve the monarchy above all else, the decision shattered something deep inside, because protecting Charlotte meant risking everything he was born to become. The pressure was immediate and suffocating. Advisors closed in from every direction, urging William to act before public outrage evolved into institutional collapse. The suggestion wasn't framed as punishment, it was branded as protection. Quietly remove Charlotte from the line of succession. Create a narrative about personal growth, stepping away, normal life. Shield her from the storm by pushing her out of the frame. It sounded strategic, logical, even merciful, but it gutted William to his core. Behind closed doors, a vote was held informal, private, but brutally divisive. Camilla was firm. Anne, though deeply respectful of Charlotte, insisted the monarchy could not weather the uncertainty. Others nodded silently, unwilling to go on record, but unmistakably aligned. And then Catherine stood. Her voice did not tremble. Her words cut like steel. If they pushed Charlotte out, she said, she would walk away from the monarchy entirely. With or without William. That night, William disappeared from the public eye. For days, he secluded himself in a remote royal estate. No staff, no security detail beyond what was absolutely necessary. No advisors. Only one thing traveled with him, a weathered envelope containing Queen Elizabeth's final letter. He read it over and over, as if hoping her words would change. But they didn't. Every time he reached the line about the one who carries both flame and memory, it felt less like prophecy and more like an unbearable burden. He sat with questions no father should ever have to answer. Could he truly protect Charlotte while standing next to her as king? Could he fulfill his oath to the crown if the crown itself now threatened the very thing he loved most? What kind of monarch defends a throne that demands the exile of his own child? What kind of father doesn't? Then came the confrontation. Charlotte, mature beyond her years and unshaken by the chaos surrounding her, found her father in the quiet of his temporary refuge. She didn't beg to stay in line. She didn't cry. She simply asked the question that broke him. If I don't want to be queen, will they let me be me? William's voice cracked when he said he didn't know. Because the truth was, he didn't. She told him she didn't want power, but she didn't want to be erased either. The next morning, without fanfare, William returned to London and visited Lambeth Palace. He carried with him a single, sealed envelope. It was handed to the Archbishop with no press, no cameras, no aides. No one knows what the letter contained. But inside that envelope was a decision that would shift the trajectory of the royal family. A choice that would no longer be political or ceremonial, but irrevocably personal. And as the world waited for his public announcement, Charlotte made one move that would render everything else irrelevant. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.